War. War never changes.
You some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to this week's episode, Operation Just Cause. Operation Just Cause, or Just Because, or more accurately Blue Spoon, conducted between 20 December of 1989 and early January, represent one of the most complex joint military operations taken by the U.S. since Vietnam. And while often remembered primarily for the removal of General Manuel Noriega from power, the operation was fundamentally a carefully planned campaign designed to seize key terrain, neutralize an opposing military force, protect critical infrastructure, and restore a friendly government with remarkable speed. From a military perspective, Just Cause demonstrated the United States Army's evolving doctrine of rapid deployment, joint operations, precision strikes, and simultaneous attacks against multiple objectives. The invasion occurred at the close of the Cold War, when the United States was reassessing its strategic priorities. By the late 1980s, however, relations between Washington and the Panamanian government had deteriorated significantly. Manuel Noriega, commander of the Panamanian Defense Forces, had become increasingly isolated following allegations of drug trafficking, corruption, and electoral manipulation. I am grasping my pearls while we speak. The United States imposed economic sanctions, suspended military cooperation, and sought diplomatic solutions to remove Noriega from power, which all failed. Military tensions gradually increased throughout 1989. American forces stationed in Panama conducted increasingly frequent exercises designed both to demonstrate freedom of movement and to prepare for any potential conflict. These operations familiarized units with likely objectives while simultaneously testing Panamanian reactions. Unlike many military interventions that require lengthy deployments into unfamiliar territory, American forces possessed extensive knowledge of Panama's geography, transportation network, and military installations after decades of permanent presence. Several incidents during 1989 accelerated planning. Harassment of American personnel by Panamanian forces became more frequent, and Noriega declared that a state of war existed between Panama and the United States. It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it pays off for him. The immediate catalyst occurred on 16 December 1989 when Panamanian forces killed U.S. Marine Lieutenant Robert Paz during a confrontation near a military checkpoint. Other military officers were detained and assaulted. These events reinforced the conclusion within Washington that diplomatic efforts had failed and that military action had become necessary. President Bush authorized Just Cause with 4 objectives. The first was the protection of American citizens residing in Panama. 35,000 Americans still live there, many, of course, associated with the Canal Zone and military installations. The second objective involved safeguarding the integrity of the Panama Canal within compliance of the Torrijos-Carter Treaty. The third objective sought the neutralization of the Panamanian Defense Forces as an organized military institution. Finally, the United States intended to support the installation of Guillermo Undara, who had won internationally recognized elections earlier that year but had been prevented from assuming office by Noriega. Unlike previous American interventions in Latin America that often involved gradually, Operation Just Cause was conceived as an integrated joint command from its inception. The operation became one of the largest military actions since the Second World War. Planning reflected lessons learned from earlier operations, including the failed Iranian hostage rescue mission and the successful Grenada invasion. Those experiences had highlighted deficiencies in joint command structure and inter-service coordination. General Maxwell Thurman, commander of the United States Southern Command, directed overall planning. His staff developed an ambitious operation, emphasizing simultaneous attacks against multiple objectives throughout Panama. Rather than concentrating forces against a single target before advancing sequentially, planners sought to overwhelm the PDF by denying them time to organize coherent resistance. The operation design identified 27 principal objectives to be seized simultaneously: military headquarters, command centers, airfields, communication facilities, ammo depots, police installations, and transportation hubs. By attacking the entire command structure at once, American planners intended to paralyze decision-making within the Panamanian Defense Forces, and speed represented the operation's defining characteristic. The Panamanian Defense Forces numbered approximately 12,000 personnel, although only a fraction constituted fully trained combat units. Much of the force consisted of police, internal security personnel, or lightly equipped infantry. Heavy armor was virtually non-existent, while air defenses remained limited. Nevertheless, planners recognized that urban combat could significantly magnify the defensive capabilities of even lightly armed troops. Special concern centered upon the Dignity Battalions, irregular paramilitary organizations loyal to Noriega. Although lacking sophisticated military training, these formations possess intimate knowledge of local neighborhoods and could potentially conduct prolonged urban resistance following the collapse of conventional military units. American planners therefore distinguish between destroying organized military resistance and restoring public order. The former might only require hours. The latter, who knows? Approximately 27,000 American personnel participated in the initial assault, supplemented by roughly 13,000 troops already stationed in Panama. 82nd Airborne, 7th Infantry Division, 75th Ranger Regiment, Special Forces, SEALs, Marines, and Air Force Special Operation Units. The operation marked the combat debut of several recently developed capabilities. F-117 Nighthawk stealth aircraft conducted precision strikes designed not to destroy large targets, but simply to disorient defenders near key objectives. Night vision technology played a crucial role. American forces possess a decisive technological advantage in conducting the nighttime operations. By initiating the invasion shortly after midnight, commanders exploited equipment that allowed infantry, aviation, and special ops to maneuver effectively in darkness. Air mobility represented another critical component of the operational plan. Helicopters inserted special operation teams directly onto objectives, while transport aircraft delivered airborne forces to the airfields. The vertical envelopment allowed American units to bypass road networks that might otherwise become blocked or defended. Simultaneous helicopter assaults complicated Panamanian efforts to determine the primary direction of attack. One of the most important objectives involved securing the Torrijos-Tocumen International Airport. Control of the airport ensured the rapid arrival of follow-on forces while preventing Noriega or senior officials from escaping by air. This mission fell on the 75th Ranger Regiment. Shortly after midnight on 20 December, C-141 transport aircraft delivered hundreds of paratroopers over the airport. Unlike earlier airborne operations intended to seize extensive territory, the Rangers focused upon rapidly securing specific military objectives, with small unit initiative proving essential. Individual platoons cleared hangars, towers, administrative buildings, and defensive positions while preventing reinforcement by Panamanian units. The successful seizure of the airport allowed additional forces to arrive within hours. Simultaneously, Navy SEAL teams conducted operations against the Patia airfield, where Noriega maintained personal aircraft, and another SEAL element targeted the Panamanian naval forces to prevent their use against American forces or canal facilities. The SEAL assault on the Patia airfield was an absolute disaster. Whether they lacked the military intelligence or the tactical acumen, they simply walked up and a small force of Panamanians slaughtered them, and the SEALs had to retreat ignominiously. After the SEAL failures in Grenada and at Panama, this constituted something of a challenge for them, and I think it took the decade of the 90s to recover. Army Special Forces conducted additional missions involving reconnaissance, liaison, and securing of critical infrastructure. Elsewhere, mechanized infantry advanced rapidly towards La Comandancia, headquarters of the Panamanian Defense Forces located in Panama City. The planners had recognized that command headquarters represented the operational center of gravity. Destroying communication between senior commanders and subordinate units would likely prove more decisive than simply inflicting casualties. Therefore, the assault on La Comandancia received particular emphasis within the overall plan. American armored vehicles, M551 Sheridan light tanks, and LAV-25 armored reconnaissance vehicles provided mobile fire support within the urban environment. Urban combat nevertheless presented more challenges. Narrow streets limited the maneuver of these vehicles. Buildings provided defenders with concealed and protected firing positions, and distinguishing military personnel from civilians required disciplined fire control. American commanders therefore emphasized rapid movement, decentralized initiative, and overwhelming local superiority, rather than prolonged exchanges of fire. Throughout the opening hours, the principle of simultaneous attack remained evident. Rather than permitting defenders to reinforce threatened sectors, the Americans just struck everywhere. And instead of destroying every enemy unit individually, commanders sought to collapse the opponent's ability to coordinate resistance. Once the communications failed and senior leaders became isolated, most of the Panamanian units just surrendered or simply took off their uniforms and walked home. By dawn, most military installations had fallen or were under sustained assault and incapable of organizing resistance. Scattered resistance continued, but the opening offensive had achieved its principal objective, the almost instant disintegration of the Panamanian Defense Forces as an effective military organization. One of the most challenging objectives was Rio Hato Airfield. approximately 70 miles southwest of Panama City. Intelligence indicated that the base housed elements of the PDF's most capable combat formations, including units believed to be personally loyal to Noriega. Responsibility for seizing Rio Hato fell again to the 75th Ranger Regiment, and, copying its earlier airfield seizure, conducted a very low-altitude parachute assault. The success of the assault depended largely upon decentralized leadership. Individual junior officers and NCOs exercised considerable initiative while remaining aligned with the overall mission. And this reflected broader developments within the U.S. Army emphasizing mission command, the delegation of authority to subordinate leaders. Other special operation forces also conducted extensive reconnaissance and direct action missions throughout the country. Delta Force, Army Special Forces, and aviation units worked together to secure communication facilities, rescue endangered personnel, identify high-value targets, and establish control. Despite the massive success of almost one day, one objective remained incomplete. Noriega himself had disappeared. The search for Noriega immediately became the campaign's central focus. Intelligence suggested that he moved frequently among safe houses while relying upon loyal supporters and informal networks. American forces established checkpoints throughout Panama City and surrounding areas, controlling major transportation routes while conducting systematic searches of suspected locations. Intelligence fusion became increasingly important. Information derived from captured documents, communications, local informants, and surveillance assets allowed commanders to narrow potential hiding places. This phase illustrated the transition from conventional warfare to what we would call now stability operations. Throughout these operations, American commanders confronted the challenge of distinguishing hostile paramilitary elements from ordinary civilians. The Dignity battalions, organized primarily as militias rather than conventional military formations, still conducted sporadic attacks against American patrols. Small unit tactics therefore emphasized aggressive patrolling, rapid reaction to ambushes, and continuous presence in areas susceptible to irregular activity. Infantry platoons frequently combined mounted patrols with dismounted searches, balancing security with efforts to reassure the local population. The collapse of organized military resistance created opportunities to encourage additional surrenders without further combat. Loudspeaker broadcast, radio transmissions, leaflets, and direct communication with isolated PDF personnel emphasized that continued resistance was futile, and these measures accelerated the dissolution of remaining organized opposition and reduced casualties on both sides. The search for Noriega unexpectedly concluded when he sought refuge in the diplomatic mission of the Holy See in Panama. Because diplomatic facilities enjoyed protected legal status, American commanders could not simply assault the compound. Instead, they established a security perimeter while initiating negotiations through diplomatic channels. And this situation produced one of the most widely publicized aspects of Operation Just Cause. Psychological operations personnel employed loudspeakers, broadcasting music and repeated messages outside the diplomatic compound. Although popular accounts often portray these broadcasts as the decisive factor leading to Noriega's surrender, their practical military purpose was more limited. The broadcast just reinforced the perception that escape was impossible and maintained continuous pressure without violating diplomatic protections. And ultimately, diplomatic negotiation proved more important than psychological pressure alone. On 3 January, Noriega surrendered and was transported to the United States, where he was ultimately charged, tried, imprisoned, and died there. And his surrender effectively terminated organized resistance. From an operational perspective, Just Cause achieved amazing success. The principal combat phase conducted within approximately 24 hours. Simultaneous assaults prevented the PDF from organizing coherent resistance, and while rapid reinforcement through secured airfields ensured overwhelming American superiority before defenders could ever recover from the initial shock. And much butthurt ensued from the fact that the Air Force's entire role was supporting. The lack of initial air power demonstrations drove much of the operational planning for both Desert Storm, Kosovo, and Iraqi freedom. Not that bombing was needed, of course. Panama was almost an unqualified success. But it started to show that joint operations, as desired by the 1986 Goldwater-Nichols reforms, had little to do with operational or strategic necessity, but rather political posturing and spending. This can explain, if only partially, our failures that defined our 21st century campaigns. I was a cadet at West Point for both Just Cause and Desert Storm, and it was humorous to see the transition of thinking from future officers. After Grenada and Just Cause, you were light infantry or you were irrelevant. Armor became a branch of last resort. And then when Desert Storm happened, suddenly the mechanized world became all the hotness, and armor was harder to get than infantry. And with all of that, I hope to finally get into a deeper dive into Clausewitz. I can only assume this will interest some and bore others. And episodes will no longer be identified by episode number in the introduction, but they will in the written description. The nature of the world demands some flexibility in when I release episodes, and waiting to the last minute to record is creating chaos in my quasi-organized mind. And if you, for some reason, want to see more inside that mind, a few more podcasts in which I was a guest have been released. Shades of J and the Misfit Nation podcast are both available now. Please note that Misfit Nation is all one word. There is another one called Misfit Space Nation, and it is a different podcast entirely. A few more are pending release in the next few months. And a reminder to check out Real Plastic Heroes. Toy Story 5 is out as a reminder that real toys matter. And finally, I am recovering from surgery, which makes future episodes a bit of a challenge. And so my thanks to everyone, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening today. If you want to help the show, please share today's episode on any social media sites you can. Check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for more information and to send me a message. And, of course, my thanks to the subscribers who help keep the show going. Hope you all join me next week. See you soon.